Hello, my name is Breeda Bermingham. And I'm delighted to have been asked to do this presentation for Cork Libraries. I'm a mother of four and a former midwife and public health nurse. I trained as a nurse in Limerick back in the late 80s, and I continued and did my midwifery there. And I subsequently did my public health nurse training in Cork and UCC in 1995. It was 1995-96. In the intervening years, I've had four children, and our youngest is now 16. Actually, he's turning 17 this year. And so after he was born, for about 10 years, I was a full-time stay-at-home mother. And Kim had asked me to talk a little bit about the challenges of returning to the workforce or returning to education once our children have started to leave the nest or become very independent. And I feel myself that there's a fantastic opportunity for women in returning to work or in returning to education or following something that really lights them up in their middle years. There's a great opportunities today compared to, let's say, when our mother's generation were at this age. So my own story is I am now the founder of the Midlife Women Rock Project and cafes. They are platforms that are positively enabling and empowering women to positively and proactively take on menopause. Fundamentally, I was catapulted into this space, the menopause land, as I call it, space, back in 2018 when I completed a psychology degree in Waterford Institute of Technology here in Waterford. I'm from Waterford myself, and I feel that that I suppose was the catalyst, as I say, to I actually stepping into this field of coaching women and setting up cafes and courses. That's my everyday life now, involves coaching women on a one-to-one basis around their menopausal journey, providing 6-week courses on positively managing and empowering women through their menopause years, doing workplace presentations. I work between the UK and Ireland, and over the last 2 years I've worked with hundreds of women who are navigating different stages of menopause. The reason I ended up working in menopause land was that when I was completing my degree in psychology, I was reviewing the research on midlife women, and we're considered the invisible women within academia. There is very little research done on this cohort within the academic world, and the repercussions of that are actually only surfacing now. I think one of the first things I want to say is that I think women, it's so imperative that women recognise their value by the time they reach 50 years of age. I can look back, I'm now 55, and I go back 5 years ago, I certainly didn't see my value. But today I see it very, very much because I'm working in the space, I've done the study, I've done research, and we have a massive skill set acquired by the time we reach 50 years of age, from managing homes, managing families, managing relationships, and then managing work outside. So that, and be it part-time, be it full-time, or even if you had stayed at home for many years like I have had, we have a massive skill set acquired, and it's just societally and culturally a shift needs to occur in order to recognise that skill set. And the Citizens' Assembly here in Ireland have been wonderful in all of the recommendations that have been recommended in the last 2 weeks. What has come out of there, if anyone's interested, you can look up my Facebook page. I have, I think, 2 or 3 videos from the Citizens' Assembly on the list of recommendations for more gender equality, which will actually be of major benefit to all of society. going back to 5 years ago, when I made this decision to return to education, it wasn't an easy one. I remember I read the book Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And my friends laugh at me now when I tell this story, but I got that book, it was at Christmas, I think, December maybe 14, and I remember reading it, and it was the first self-help book that I'd ever actually read, that I actually acted upon it. There was action steps to be taken. I did the action steps, and I ended up applying through the CAO for a psychology degree. When I was accepted, and when I suppose I was delighted, but I remember, I can physically remember the how nervous I was on that first day going into the college, Waterford Institute of Technology here in Waterford. I went, it was week to week, it was fear, there was massive fear. I was fearful of how I'd be perceived here, fearful of how would I be able to cope with the study. I was afraid of would I manage the exams. So the fear was huge for me when I started off in making the decision to return to education. And the other big word was courage. I used to go around on my phone, and I had courage written on it. It was on my screensaver. And for about 2 years, maybe 3 even, after going back into full-time education, I had courage, because I felt it was courage every day to go in, to study, and to embrace what I had started on. And the interesting thing about when we are afraid, or when fear, shows up in our lives, which I've learned again because I've done a lot of research around the psychology of fear. Fear is there, and it's in many ways it's kind of drawing us towards something. If there's something in your life that you really want to do, and fear, you feel, oh gosh, I could never do that. It's worth spending some time thinking about why you think you can't, because most often they're kind of these self-fulfilling prophecies. We think we can't do it, or I wouldn't be good enough. And I have to say, when I went back to college, the lecturers were fantastic. The other students were fantastic. I was very lucky. There were other mature students back in WIT doing arts and other aligned degrees. So there was a cohort. And what I learned at the end of the first semester is that I was actually very well able to study for the exams and for study. So a lot of these misconceptions and myths we have, they're in our own minds. So it's overcoming those are crucial. But it's about stepping outside the comfort zone, having that, it's courage. That's the word, the huge word for me was courage. Having the courage to say, hey, I'm 49. My children are getting older. I didn't want to return to nursing. I just wanted to do something or study something different. And that's fundamentally what led me to applying and taking it. For anyone that is considering going back to education, go semester by semester, week by week even, and you will get help. The lecturers were just fantastic, and most of us at our age that go back to education, we're going back to study something we really want to study. And that is, it's a game changer, because I used to spend hours in the libraries reading outside of my course, because I really, really enjoyed what I was doing. So I did the degree finished the degree in 2018. I then had this idea about, so menopause, I guess, became an area of interest. And the reason I became interested in menopause is that I personally see a massive injustice to women in the framing of menopause. It's imperative that we start normalising the conversation and start opening up the conversation around menopause. And interestingly, I'm making this video now after Joe Duffy has been on Liveline for 3 days, listening to stories from women all over Ireland talking about their menopausal experience. And having worked with hundreds of women over the last 2 years, these stories are, they're not, I'm not shocked at what I'm hearing. And these stories need to be told, and they need to come out, and there is an uncomfortableness by around hearing these stories, but there's no longer a legitimacy in the silence and the shame, the stigma, the fear, the denial. When I decided to investigate menopause further, I set up the Midlife Women Rock cafes. And as a midwife, I came up with this idea because I had seen the power of the breastfeeding support groups, mother and toddler groups, and I'd seen the power of when women get together and they start talking, everything can change and everything can shift. And in my own background, I'd seen that. So that's why I set up the cafes, and the first one was opened in Waterford at Grow HQ in June 2019. And I did it with the support of Social Entrepreneurs Ireland. When I finished my degree, I applied to the Social Entrepreneurs Ireland Academy, and I was fortunate enough to get a place in the academy, and they were instrumental in helping me get started with the cafes. So the cafes continued monthly. Women were starting to come together. The majority of them had never spoken to anybody about menopause before, or they were finding it very, very difficult to get information. There was a voracious appetite for information, and what I discovered was that the silence is the problem. If we open up and start talking and start sharing the stories with one another, we're going to remove the taboo, and it is one of the last great taboos, I feel, in women's healthcare, menopause. So that was 2019. I was running the cafes, and then that led to COVID. So we then went on Zoom, and I, subsequent to starting the cafes, starting to meet women, listening to stories from women, I wanted to dig further into the research, because menopause is not a subject that there is a lot of research done. There's a lot of medical research on it, but there's very little other research, and there's very little on women's voices, very little heard from women. And it's an evolving story. The story of menopause is still evolving. Looking at what's happened in the UK in the last 2 years, it's grown exponentially. The media now have become extremely interested, and it's a grassroots women's movement that's actually shifting the dial in the UK, and we're only just tipping the surface here. We're starting, I think, to open the conversation. And I'm interested in the social construction of it, because I believe that the way it has been framed it hasn't served women's best interests. So looking at returning to the workforce, as Kim had mentioned, women, I think confidence and courage, they're my two big words that I feel an awful lot of women need a little bit of support in that area, the whole courage and confidence. Because in perimenopause, let's say, the majority of women enter perimenopause in their 40s. Now, I had never heard of the word perimenopause prior to 2018. A lot of women say to me, you must have, you're a nurse, you're a midwife. No, but it doesn't matter. I've discovered if you're a midwife, you're a doctor, you're a professor. The problem with the silence around a taboo subject is that we have very little information, and there has been so little information around menopause. So I went back to do my master's last year, and I went to Maynooth, and I was very fortunate. Again, there was a lovely group there doing the masters of all ages, and I had a fabulous supervisor. My thesis was titled Silence, Taboo and Midlife Women, and that involved interviewing 20 women in Ireland on their experiences and understanding of menopause. And what came out of my research is that, number one, silence is the real enemy. We have to open the conversation if we want to shift the dial around the way perimenopause and menopause is framed in this country. And it is uncomfortable. Some women don't like talking about it. But, if we want to tap into these magnificent positives or superpowers, is what I talk about in my own work. There are magnificent superpowers as such that women can actually access as we're moving through our menopausal years. And menopause is a transition. It's the opposite of puberty. If you look and think about puberty, for anyone that has teenage children, it takes quite a few years. There's turbulence, you know, there's some changes in the body, there's changes in the skin, you know, there's mood swings, there's banging doors, there's silent times. Menopause is the reversal of that. It's a transition. It's not a disease, and it's so misunderstood, I beg your pardon. It's misunderstood, and there's so little understanding around it, and that's what's causing an awful lot of the issues and the problems that we associate with it. Because the truth, and in my own research, having been reviewing the research since 2018, along with carrying out my own research last year, the truth is that once women are educated, once they're informed, once they understand that this is a transition that affects us not only physically but psychologically and emotionally, and that it's like getting on a bridge and going over a bridge. That's what the whole transition is. And sometimes the bridge is going to be rocky, but with the right supports, every woman is going to get over that bridge. But at the moment, because of the silence, we're not. There's a massive injustice here. We're not getting the support we deserve. There's no public display of menopause information. The HSE website is even very poorly equipped. GP surgeries, they don't have flyers or anything. You see, we are the invisible women. Menopause has been a subject that has been taboo, and anywhere that shame or stigma arises or lurks, there's always conformity and silence. And menopause is a typical example of when I was looking at the research around shame, because that came up last year. The themes of my own research were shame, fear, massive denial. Women do not want to have reached menopause. And when I explained that, my God, there are massive gifts and superpowers that are actually open to us when we get to this time in life, a lot of them are in shock. But for the many hundreds of women that I've worked with in the last 2 years, I have witnessed how information and understanding changes everything. And one of the areas that I am very, very interested in is the natural leadership ability of midlife women. From all of our acquired skills, no matter what profession you've worked in, no matter if you've been at home and looking after a family, you've innate leadership ability. And it's to have somebody then to help you to tap into that innateness. And I talk about there's 4 pillars when I am working with women who are transitioning through menopause. We have to manage, when it comes to management, there is the physical, there is the psychological, there is the psychological, mental, there's the emotional, and there's the spiritual. There are 4 different dimensions that are involved in the pathway. And I talk about these different dimensions when I work with women. And my own background from working with women for years and years is that women are truly amazing. We meet challenges all of the time. And I know for a fact that if women had the right information, if we normalise the conversation around menopause, our midlife years could be and can be our best years yet. And for anyone that is interested in having a look at my work, you can look up the midlifewomenrockproject.com, and there are links there to social media. I run 6-week courses, I do one-on-one consultations, and I do workplace presentations and talks, because it's the conversation, it's removing the taboo, ladies. This is what's going to make a massive difference to us in our midlife years. Courage, confidence, reaching out for support. I think these are the buzzwords that they're when I look back for me and following my fear. I've followed the fear and it has led me and it has opened doors. It has been very, very difficult, as in, there's been massive hurdles that I've had to overcome because I'm an introvert. I'm a natural introvert. I'm a natural team player. I prefer to play behind the scenes, but having come in and worked in menopause land, I'm here now. So get in touch, and the very best of luck. Thank you.